Apakaya Jadhamasi Sarvadha Swarupine Sapakaya Jadhamasi Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna Yate Nama Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritangamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us bow down to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. We have been discussing about various aspects of discrimination, viveka. Sri Ramakrishna said the mind of a person who is totally involved in the world is like muddy water. But it can be made clear by purifying agent. Discrimination and renunciation are the purifying agent. So, it is important to know various aspects of discrimination, and it is very useful for those who are trying to live spiritual life. Viveka is very essential to go onward in the spiritual journey. When I discussed that, I was explaining the viveka is of four types: karya-kari viveka, nitya-nitya vastu viveka, drik-drishya viveka, sasad vastu viveka, sat-asat astu viveka. This way there are four types of discrimination. Viveka means discrimination. So, we were just thinking on the first type of vivek, karya, akarya, vivek. What things we ought to do, what things we ought not to do. It lies entirely in you. If you do what you ought not to do, you will suffer the consequences of that act. In the same way, if you do what you ought to do, you reap the good benefit of it. Then I was discussing about various types of happiness, and when the discrimination should be applied, when good and pleasant present before a person, he should not be deluded by the pleasant, but he should be wise enough to select to choose Shreyas, which takes him straight towards liberation. And various types of happiness which we experience in this world were also thought upon. The lowest type of joy is Vishaya Sukha. That is, when the mind dwells on the sense pleasure, it is the lowest of happiness. When the mind dwells on the senses, when it is hankering after to enjoy that type of happiness, it is called Rajasic Sukh. And if the mind dwells on sleeping, it wants to sleep more and more. That happiness is called Tamasic Sukh. You derive happiness, no doubt, but that arises from sleep and indolence. So, these are the categories, and when we were discussing about these categories, I also mentioned there is a joy of self-control, Shama Sukha. Higher than self-control is Atma Sukha, the joy of realizing the Atman, the joy of experiencing your true self is called Atma Sukha. Higher than Atma Sukha is the happiness that you derive when your mind is full of Brahman. When you realize the whole thing is nothing but Brahman, when you no longer feel your little individual self, when you realize that you are everything, when you are able to experience that highest form of oneness, where there is no duality, one only exists, ekameva advitiyam. The source of all sources, the substratum of everything. When you reach that state, then you get immense joy. It's called Brahmananda Sukh. That is the highest. That's the highest. So, I am just discussing this Karya Vivek. The subject is not yet complete, so I am trying to give some more thoughts on this Karya Vivek. As I said, how Shreyas is very important. Shreyas is always associated with the highest form of happiness. Whereas the preyas is associated with lower type. If you hold on to the happiness of the pleasant, you are bound to suffer. But if you try to keep yourself towards getting the joy of good, then you are really enjoying the beauty of life. But there is some difficulty in choosing the right type, because the higher forms of happiness, they are not immediately obvious. They are not available to us. In the Gita, Lord Krishna points out the Rajasic type of happiness. It appears like nectar in the beginning, but turns out to be poison in the end. On the contrary, Sattvic happiness appears like poison in the beginning, though it turns out to be nectar in the end. Sattvic happiness, how it is derived? It is a result of purity of mind, purity of buddhi, intellect, and a taste for it can be acquired only after prolonged effort, struggle. You will have to struggle quite a bit in order to taste the Sattvic Sukh, in order to taste the happiness of the good. The senses, they are very powerful. They are so powerful, they drag the mind to the immediate pleasure. Instantly, you don't know how you behave. Suddenly you become mad after something. You crave. You are just walking in the street. You see something, immediately you are excited and you commit some action which is not good. So at that moment you are not aware of what you are doing. That's the type of happiness people generally aspire in this world. It's only by God's grace and by the holy company you will be able to know higher forms of happiness. God's grace is very important. Holy association is equally important. It is through holy association you will be able to recognize the grace of God. Then only you can distinguish what is really good for you. So, you must develop a liking for higher forms of happiness. And you must accept them as a goal of your striving. When that is set properly, then you can properly discriminate between happiness and sorrow. For a person who seeks higher forms of happiness, even lower forms of happiness give only sorrow. This is the first type of discrimination that all spiritual aspirants must practice. He no more likes the worldly pleasures. He just runs away from them. The second guiding principle of this Karya Vivek is Dharma Vivek. That is, what is virtue? What is vice? He should be able to distinguish properly. The natural tendency of the human mind is to tread the path of ease and comfort. It doesn't want to be restrained. It doesn't want responsibilities. Some people, there are people who talk about, Swamiji, I am prepared to do any work, but don't give me any responsibility. That means he is not definite of what he intends to do. He may do, he may not do. He is so diffident of doing the things. That's why he is afraid of taking any responsibility. There is a very good Sanskrit saying, Punyasya phalamichanti, punyam nechanti manavaha, napapa phalamichanti, papam kurvanti yatnataha. Very significant verse. Its meaning is this: people are very eager to get the fruit of virtuous actions, but do not do virtuous actions. Without doing the things, they want the result. They want the good result. Then, nobody wants the fruit of sinful actions. Nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants any punishment. Nobody wants to be humiliated. But people go on committing sin with much effort. So, that's the paradox. It is very important, therefore, to know what is virtue, dharma. Dharma means duty, responsibility. Yet, it is difficult to define precisely. Great philosophers, sages and thinkers have debated about its true nature. How exactly dharma is defined. Because what dharma interpretation is given by Indians may be quite different by the interpretation you get in Western countries. Then again, dharma is defined in different ways according to different religious feelings. However, this point is true. Social life would be impossible if it were not based on virtue. And if virtue were a fluid and constantly changing concept. Society cannot survive that way. So all the great religions, what they have done, they have fixed their followers certain laws of conduct as the basis of virtue. Each religion has got its own set of conduct, code of conduct. You should do like this, you should do like that, etc. Don't do this, do this, etc. In order to properly direct your senses in the right direction, these rules of conduct were prescribed. That means how it is important that one should cherish moral life before starting spiritual life. This moral life should be based on certain eternal and universal ethical principles. All these steps are to be taken. Like, for example, truthfulness, non-violence, chastity, charity, and so on. These constitute the moral order of the universe. Wherever you find people practicing these, you see remarkable peace and happiness in that place where these are practiced. Where these are practiced. If you go to a place where a holy person is practicing spirituality in all earnestness, you feel about 10 miles diameter, the whole atmosphere is serene and calm. To give my experience, once with another Swami, I had gone to pilgrimage, Kedar Badrinath in Himalayas. This place where I visited, it was beyond Haridwar. Somebody suggested, I think it is in Rishikesh, it's just higher than Haridwar. Rishikesh is a place where lots of sadhus, they stay and meditate and study, etc. One of the brahmacharis who escorted us, he was showing the places. This is Kailas ashram, this is that ashram, like that they were introducing different ashramas, showing all to us. And then that brahmachari said, there is one sadhu here, there is one holy man here. If you want to see, I am prepared to take you. He does not speak, but he is really very great. Then we said, all right, we are prepared to go. And he took us. We walked about a mile or so, going up and down the rocks. Then I asked that brahmachari, how far still we to go? Should we keep on walking like this? How long we have to walk? No, he was showing a big rock. How can a person stay there? But no, you please come, I will show you where he is staying. He took us around the rock. It's a huge rock. When you get around it, in one corner, that holy man was sitting with only lion cloth. And that brahmachari was telling, even in winter he doesn't wear clothes. Of course his body was full of ash. His body is smeared with ashes. But even then, it's not an easy thing to be there like that. And I saw him, he was so peaceful and contented. His eyes were very broad eyes, beautiful eyes. Even now I remember his eyes. He would not speak. Just he smiled. How many people used to come just to visit him? In front of me I saw at least 20, 30 people coming there and seeing that Swami and feeding him. He would open his mouth and they would put plankton in his mouth. Anyway, so these are the things which we should practice. Truthfulness, non-violence, etc. So, Viveka means the discrimination between dharma and adharma. What is good, what is virtue, should be guided by these fundamental virtues. It is difficult to find one universal standard for the judgment of the moral conduct. But Swami Vivekananda has given his own prescription. That's very relevant and it is current, I should say. In modern times, it is wonderful if we follow Vivekananda's ways, teachings. Because he has given the teachings in the modern language. In the modern language, you understand properly that way. So Swami Vivekananda said, selflessness is a touchstone of morality. Selflessness is the touchstone of morality. Swami Vivekananda continues, he tells, the only definition that can be given of morality is this: that which is selfish is immoral, and that which is unselfish is moral. So, your Viveka must be practiced in such a way that it should make you more and more selfless. The more and more you are coming to Vivekananda Vedanta Society, the more and more you are associated with its activities, the more and more you must become selfless. That's very important. For it's only on such a firm moral foundation that a stable spiritual life can be built. Strong foundation. Without foundation, what life you can build? So, discrimination between happiness and sorrow, discrimination between dharma and adharma, these then are the two principles which should guide us in practicing karya-karya viveka and choosing the right course of action. That's all about the first type of discrimination. Karya-karya viveka. What ought to be done, what ought not to be done. What is shreyas, what is preyas. What is good, what is pleasant. What should be taken, what should be rejected. This type of analysis is first type of discrimination. I am telling you 4 types of discrimination. All these 4 types we must adapt to make your foundation very strong. These are the pillars of spiritual life. The second one is also very common in Vedanta. It's called Nitya-Nitya Vastu Viveka. Because every day we pray. Today also I prayed. Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, like that. That means you have to discriminate what is permanent, what is impermanent. You must apply your intellect. If you don't use your intellect properly, it becomes blunted. Afterwards, it goes without use. A spiritual aspirant must be very alert, and all his instruments must be in perfect condition. So, when I speak of impermanence or change, I refer to two poles of your experience. Two poles of your experience. Objective experience and subjective experience. Objective and subjective. Objective is very perceptible. You see constant changes going on in the external world. Seasons come and go. Summer comes, goes away. Spring comes, goes away. Winter comes, goes away. Comes and goes, comes and goes. Plants, they grow, they bloom, then they decay. Same way clouds you see in the sky, they come with terrific force, then they disappear. Another set of clouds come, again disappear. Go to the unknown destination. That means a person of spiritual life should watch these things carefully to learn a lesson. Rivers, they wear down the hills and hurry away to the ocean. The ocean itself does not remain the same. It ceaselessly heaves and buckles and breaks into millions of waves which lash against the shore in interminable caprice. In fact, even if you see the lake, oh, when the waves come, how it looks like an ocean, our Chicago lake. In the midst of this eternal flux, man stands alone, facing the unknown on all sides. So along with the perception of all these changes of the objective world, there is in man an awareness of the changes occurring in his own life and inner world of experience. From time immemorial, mankind has been haunted by the spectre of doom and destruction. Life from childhood and youth through old age seems to be a relentless march towards the grave. While there seems to be no end to the mind's craving. All sense pleasures prove to be transitory. There is hardly a man whose life has been an unbroken chain of happy experiences. Unfulfillment, frustration, sorrow and fear trot out in an endless procession from the dark caverns of our mind to blackmail our contentment. We are made miserable. So these two types of impermanence, that of the external objects and their pleasures, may not strike all people as forcefully as they did the Buddha. Buddha, his spirit of renunciation was awakened when he saw the things in the world. To many, this awareness may come in the form of a vague yearning, a feeling of emptiness and rootlessness. This has now become a common phenomenon among the youth. The search for meaning and identity crisis are only the outer signs of an inner search for permanence. This means that some type of nitya vastu viveka is going on at the unconscious levels in the minds of these people, of which they are not fully aware. Nitya means what is eternal, what is not non-eternal, what is permanent, what is impermanent. The point is, owing to ignorance and lack of proper guidance, this incipient and unrecognized discrimination is seldom brought to the conscious level and developed into a spiritual technique. As a result, what we see, it may often produce only pessimism and melancholy, and in extreme cases may drive young people into hippism, drug addiction, and other self-destructive habits. Because they feel totally empty. They pass through a state of void. They feel utterly miserable. Some may not even tolerate to continue their life. But for a few fortunate souls, this unconscious discrimination may open the door to spiritual life. It may take them to the company of holy men, from whom they learn how to convert the unconscious discriminative process into a powerful spiritual tool to tear the veil of Maya. So to tear the veil of ignorance, you must require good guidance. Indeed, discrimination between the permanent and the impermanent marks the beginning of true spiritual life, for it turns the soul away from the struggle for existence and urges it to struggle for higher consciousness. The danger of backsliding can be avoided only by practicing this discrimination constantly and making it a habit. All true spiritual aspirants find that one of the most effective ways of checking the impetuous rush of the mind towards objects of pleasures is to practice this kind of discrimination. How does this work? What makes the mind pass when it is told of impermanence and destruction? There is in all human beings a basic urge for immortality and the experience of everlasting bliss. The soul cannot forever remain satisfied with fleeting little pleasures. When, however, it learns that all sense pleasures are transitory and life on earth itself does not last long, it tries to seek the source of boundless and everlasting bliss within. This automatically withdraws the mind from sense objects and reduces its gyrations. A devotee of God finds this discrimination a great help in intensifying his yearning for God. Finding all forms of human love limited and unstable, he loves God alone. Finding all forms of enjoyment transitory, he lives for God alone. Finding all worldly supports impermanent and unreliable, he depends on God alone. There's a very famous prayer song given by Sri Shankaracharya, Shiva Parada Kshamapana Stotra, praying Lord Shiva to forgive. In that stotra, one of the verse tells like this: Ayurnashyati Pashyatam Pratidinam Yati Kshayam Yauvanam Pratyayanti Gataha Punarna Divasaha Kalo Jagat Bhakshakaha Lakshmi Stoya Taranga Bhanga Chapala Vidyuchalam Jeevitam Tasman Mam Sharanagatam Sharanadatvam Raksha Rakshadhuna. O Lord, with the passing of days, the duration of life shortens and youth decays. The days that are gone never come back. Time devours the whole world. Fortune is as fickle as the ripples on the surface of water. And life is as momentary as a flash of lightning. Therefore, O Shiva, the refuge of all, do thou even now protect me, who have taken refuge in thee. That's the prayer. Discrimination between the permanent and the impermanent has another important use for spiritual aspirants. It reminds them of the value of time. Value of time. About this I will discuss much more points in my next class. Page 508. Others said, near Sita Kund I visited a well where I saw fire in the water. It is always burning on the water with leaping tongues. Master, how is that possible? Others said, the water contains phosphorus. Presently, Ram Chatterjee entered the room. The master said some kind words about him to other. Master said, Ram's presence in the temple garden has relieved us of many anxieties. He searches out Harish, Latu and the others at mealtime. Very often they are absorbed in meditation in some corner of the temple garden. It is Ram who sees that they eat at the proper time. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna was seated in others' parlor on the second floor. Narendra, the Mukherjee brothers, Bhavanath, M. Hazra and other devotees were with the master. Arrangements were being made for Narendra to sing. While he was tuning the tanpura, one of the strings snapped and the master exclaimed, "Oh, what have we done?" Narendra then tuned the drums. The master said to him, "You are beating that drum, and I feel as if someone was slapping my cheek." Referring to the kirtan, Narendra said, "There is not much rhythm in the kirtan. That's why it is so popular." So, Viveka. in one of the class I told that one Swami told the disciple, self-analysis not for 6 hours only. Throughout the day you must do self-analysis. Because the moment you stop doing analysis, that moment may be your weak moment. Why should you give chance to allow yourself to become weak? If you are always analyzing, then you will be always on the guard. You won't slip. Even if you slip, you know why you slipped. So discrimination is very important, because I am only touching the second part. There's total 4 vivekas are there. We have to understand and practice. Abhyasad ramate. Abhyasad ramate. Lord Krishna says in the Gita. By effort, you can achieve the result. Effort is important. Effort. You have come here to do effort, to make your effort. So spiritual pursuit is a real pursuit in life. But how few people understand that. People think life means go on and enjoy yourself to heart's content and do anything you want. That is a philosophy. Philosophy of pleasure. Pleasure philosophy. Hedonistic attitude. Hedonistic attitude. That ruins the person totally. You have to withdraw from the dreadful hedonistic attitude. Don't run after the foolish pleasures of the world. That's the purpose of spiritual life. If you come to spiritual life, you'll get what is real. You will have the experience of the reality. Any question? Anindya?